And there was no reason to anyway, because Harry treated me very, very fairly and honorably, too much so, I think. And so yeah, we said yes. I was in Charleston 1 week later, I believe, and it was actually a very long flight from Salt Lake to Charleston. I walked in, it was like 11 o'clock at night. She had fixed some dinner, she knew I hadn't eaten. She said, "Oh, would you like something to eat?" And I said, "No, please, I would like the ending." By that point, I knew that she had told me that Robert Jordan had written the last chapter himself. The last scenes were done, and there was an outline. And there was also a sheet that said who killed Asmodean. And it was all in a stack, and she laughed and she handed me that. And I sat down in Robert Jordan's chair next to his computer, and I read that. And the ending is the right ending. I'm not going to change it. I will stay out of it. There may be some editing that needs to be done and things like that, but my default has been if Robert Jordan wrote something, then it goes in, and we'll make sure that I'm not changing things around unless the story really demands it. And so I read that, and it was just having followed the books for 18 years, it was the right ending. You'll get to read it eventually. I'm sorry it's taking me so long. I'm only one person, and there's only so quick. I can only write so quickly, particularly with the number of characters, plot lines, threads, world building. There's so much to the series that it is a lot of work to get it right. It took me 18 months to get the Gathering Storm to you. But the second one will be faster because I've already written a bunch of scenes from it. But I'm sorry it's taking so long, but the ending is right. And you will like it. You will love it when you get it. I've already read it. So I'm going to go ahead and read to you from chapter 1. I choose chapter 1 this time. I read from several different places, but it feels like the right place to start, simply because it's a place where you can see some of Jim's words and some of my words. Specifically, I don't say a lot about what Jim wrote and what I wrote. I try to stay away from that. I eventually will reveal these things if Harry lets me after the third book is out. But as we know, the first paragraph is always the same. Those are Jim's words. And some of the other words are mine. I ask that you not, particularly on the first read, concern yourself overly much on which is which. If you do want to read some of Jim's writing, read the first scene of the prologue about the farmer, which was one of the in fact, I think it's the very last scene he worked on. He dictated it on his deathbed, line by line. So you can read that, and that entire scene was Jim's. There is, of course, some editing and some revisions that I had to do because he just kind of off the cuff said it, but I left as much as possible, and I didn't add or take anything away from the actual narrative. So go ahead and read that sometime and think of Robert. And chapter 1, Tears from Steel. The wheel of time turns, and ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gave it birth comes again. In one age, called the third age by some, an age yet to come, an age long past, a wind rose around the alabaster spire known as the White Tower. The wind was not the beginning. There are neither beginnings nor endings to the turning of the wheel of time, but it was a beginning. The wind twisted around the magnificent tower, brushing perfectly fitted stones and flapping majestic banners. The structure was somehow both graceful and powerful at the same time. A metaphor, perhaps, for those who had inhabited it for over 3,000 years. Few looking upon the tower would guess that at its heart it had been both broken and corrupted, separately. The wind blew, passing through a city that seemed more a work of art than a workaday capital. Each building was a marvel. Even the simple granite shopfronts had been crafted by meticulous ogier hands to evoke wonder and beauty. Here a dome hinted at the form of a rising sun. There a fountain sprang from the top of a building itself, cresting what appeared to be two waves crashing together. On one cobbled street, a pair of steep three-story buildings stood opposite one another, each crafted into the form of a maiden. The marble creations, half statue, half dwelling, reached with stone hands toward one another as if in greeting. hair billowing behind, immobile, yet carved with such delicacy that every strand seemed to undulate in the wind's passing. The streets themselves were far less grand. Oh, they had been laid out with care, radiating from the White Tower like streaks of sunlight. Yet that sunlight was dimmed by refuse and clutter, hints at the crowding the siege had caused. And perhaps the crowding wasn't the only reason for the disrepair. The short storefront signs and awnings hadn't seen wash or polish in far too long. Rotting garbage piled where it had been dumped in alleys, drawing flies and rats, but driving away all others. Dangerous toughs lounged on the street corners. Once, they'd never dared do that, and certainly not with such arrogance. Where was the White Tower of the law? Young fools laughed, saying that the city's troubles were the fault of the siege, and that things would settle down once the rebels were quelled. Older men shook their gray-streaked heads and muttered that things had never been this bad, even when the savage Aiel had besieged Tarvalon some 20 years previously. Merchants ignored both old and young. They had their own problems, mainly on South Harbor, where trade into the city by way of the river had nearly come to a halt. Thick-chested workers toiled beneath the eyes of an Aes Sedai wearing a red-fringed shawl. She used the one power to remove wards and weaken the stone, while the workmen broke the rock apart and hauled it away. The workmen had sleeves rolled up, exposing curls of dark hair along burly arms as they swung pick or hammer, pounding at the ancient stones. They dripped sweat onto rock or into water below as they dug at the roots of the chain that blocked passage into the city by river. Half of that chain was now indestructible Glendiar, called Heartstone by some. The effort to tear it free and allow passage into the city was an exhausting one. The harbor stoneworks, magnificent and strong, shaped by the power itself, were only one of the more invisible casualties of the silent war between the rebel Aes Sedai and those who held the tower. The wind blew through the harbor, where idling porters stood watching the workers chip the stones away one by one, sending flakes of gray-white dust to float on the water. Those with too much sense, or perhaps too little, whispered that such portents could only mean one thing: Tarmangaiden, the last battle, must quickly be approaching. We will stop there.